I was born in Coperchia, which is a town, and it is also one of the 5 towns in our area, right outside of Salerno, about a couple, 3 kilometers from Salerno. And the 5 towns, they were known as frazione, and they were governed in by the comune, which was the city hall, and Pellezzano was the comune where the place was. And my father, and we lived in Coperchia, where I was born in 1933. My father was the tax assessor and collector for the 5 towns, and his office was at the Comune di Pellezzano, Provincia Salerno, province, which would be like a county, the same as over here. When I was born, I was the second child. The first child was my sister, Balbina, or otherwise known Barbara, but Balbina was the name that she was referred to, and she was 2 years ahead of me. We lived in the town, and we had our own home, not a flat, but a home, standing home type, and we had a garden there in the back. We also owned some land where we raised just about any type of food that we needed to survive. During the war especially, we were self-sufficient. On the premise in Coperchia, down at the town, we raised our own food in the way of chicken, rabbits, and pigs. So we made sausages and what have you. The other section of the land that we owned, we raised, we had a person that took care of it. We raised anywhere from potatoes, vegetables, corn, fruit of any type, including chestnuts and what have you. Now it's all subdivided, of course, But so the town was approximately about 1,000 people or so. All of them, all the 5 towns were about the same size, and they were under the same government. So we were well off to begin with, and the war was not that difficult for us because we were self-sufficient. Now, my mother was just home type, They too had land in Pellezzano, so the reason that I mentioned that because during the war we had to go there. My mother, she was very observant as to what I was able to do, capable of doing at my age. And the reason I say that is because she convinced the school people to take me about 6 months before they were supposed to, because I was born in January and I would have to wait until the fall of January 1933. I had to wait until I reached a certain age. Well, my mother decided that I was supposed to be starting earlier, so I started before the regular time, the fall before the projected time. And so I went. I was 1 year away from my starting, and 1 year behind my sister, which I should have been 2 years because she was born 2 years before I was. Well, so at the age of 10, we graduated, from the school, the primary school, and we went to the city of Salerno because we didn't have, of course, the high school and the middle school or the gymnasio and the liceo, but Salerno did. So we had to go to Salerno for that. So at the age of 10, I started the middle school, which went past in comparison to the American, past the 9th grade, ninth and a half or so. From there you went to the gymnasio and then you went to the liceo. The school in those days is different from here. We had to study not only Italian but Latin back to back because it was the base of the language, and French. So those were mandatory. You had no choice. Now they have changed, of course. Probably most likely would be English instead of French. So I graduated. We finished school, and that was approximately the time that the war came to us. The war was already going on because it had started in other areas other than Italy, but we didn't have any war problems as far as bombing or anything of the type. When the war started, was when the Allies and the Italian government gave up the alliance with the Germans, and so we were at odds with the Germans now because we were once their allies, and now we had become, I guess, their enemies and what have you. So we had some problems with that, which I will talk to in a minute. The schooling, I went there for the 3 years and finished that. Then the war came, and that was in 1943, September the 9th, 9 o'clock at night. The landing of the Allies started in Salerno. Salerno is a port city. They did not land, or did not come to the port because it was under the mountains and didn't allow, and there was no shore that allowed for the equipment to get off the boat, and come to the mainland. So they landed in Pestum, which is a little bit south of Salerno, which has a nice shore type, flat, so that they could come off the boat with their equipment. At that time, we began to experience then the bombing of the Allies and the retreat of the German army coming from Africa. They went through Sicily, and then they crossed the Strait of Messina, and they came to the mainland, which is South Italy, and they kept right on going. Well, we experienced then a little bit of difficulty with the Germans because they weren't very happy, and they didn't treat us very well. But it wasn't too bad because they were mostly on the move. Their intention was to go north so that they could get back to Germany. So we suffered some, but not too much. During that time, they did take, sometimes if they needed to, some of the people, young people, and they used them for labor so that they could then leave the soldiers for their job. Although they locked horn in Casino. That's called Casino. So Salerno was just a passing stage. During that time, we had some bombings, and because Salerno was the hub of the railroad area, so they did that. The bombing was somewhat selective, and we could tell. We learned, that by experience, we could tell whether they were English bombers or American bombers by the sound of the engines of the plane. And so we would know how careful we had to be. And the reason I say this is because the Americans were very, very selective. They seemed to bomb only that which was necessary that would disrupt, the Germans. The English were not. And so we had to be careful. One instance of being careful, one time we were at a house, at a home, and we heard an explosion, as the planes came by, and we knew that they were not Americans. We knew that they were English. And what it was that they were throwing objects, such as fountain pen and other objects, that anybody that would pick them up and fool with them or whatever, they would explode. That's right, they would explode. And so we learned a lesson for that. The German army then went through. During the bombing, because we were too close to Salerno, we moved for about 10 days until the Germans passed through. We moved to Pellezzano, my mother's place, on their land. During the day, we would be in the house and what have you. But at night, when they would come for the bombing, because usually the bombing came at night, we were in a cave, which was on the mountains. And the cave was a type of a cave that they made coal, out of that. So we stayed there. And while we were there off the town, away in there, well, I said the Germans were retreating. Well, all of a sudden, us kids, were moving around and what have you, and halfway from the town to the land where we were, the place where we were, the ranch, we saw a German soldier, young man, may have been 18, 19 years old, defecting. He was getting away. So he wanted shelter. And we, kids, we took him with us. And we brought him in, and we hid him, and we would bring him food and so on and so forth, And nobody knew that he was there, because had they known or that I found out, I wouldn't be here now talking to you, And so, we made sure that he was turned to the American soldiers and not anybody else. So from when they came, we found out who the Americans were, and so on and so forth, and we said, we have someone that you would need to take care of. And he was so happy. And I don't remember his name, but anyway, there was one experience of the war. I understand that from Casino on up, the Italians, some of the areas such as Torino, Milano, and in the Lombardia and the Alps, they suffered quite a bit from the Germans. They would take some of the Italians even to Auschwitz, put them on a train. I'm sorry. And they would be gone. Part of it because the Italians tried to protect and hide the Jews. The best place of where they kept them away, outside of being in the basement of a house or something like that, were the churches. And Milano was one of them, Torino. They were in the churches. And they would take them, they had people that knew the countryside, and so they would take them over and bring them over to the safe side, a few at a time, other times, and but they never bombed the churches. Now, they had people in Italy that they talked to each other on the radio, so they kept in touch with the Allies. And one way that they kept the churches from being bombed, at night, because they came at night, the churches would have lights, and they knew how the lights were, put on, disposed of, and the bombers would stay away from it, and so the churches were not bothered and not damaged. Occasionally, they would by mistake, because sometimes, the bombs, you set it up so high and the current shifts, and so sometimes that would happen. And then if the English came, well, that's a different story. They bomb anything in a way, just tabula rasa, just a tabula rasa, it's flatten everything, But anyway, so the northern Italians suffered. Now, why it took them so long? And that they were buying, the reason that they were holding Anzio and Cassino is to stall, because the German army could not go back to Germany freehand like they would have if they didn't have to go through France, Austria, and etc. There was only one pass that they could get through, and it was known as the Brenner Pass. It was just through the Alps, so that was the only access that they had to get out and go back to Germany. So it took them a long time. Torino, having also industries of mechanics, cars and things like that. While they were there, they needed, of course, parts and things like that. So they used the factories of the Fiat, Torino, to make parts for their equipment and what have you that they had. So anyway, the northern Italian suffered more than the southern Italian. Salerno, while Rome was under the siege of the Germans, was the temporary capital, for until they freed Rome, and then of course they moved up. So that was the war, and our house was damaged, but not completely, and so we had to rebuild it a little bit, but it was fine. It was nothing major. Now, the war was over. We had correspondence over here in America with my grandfather, who had been here for many years. And if somebody asks us, well, why did it take so long, for you to come here and join him? Well, a couple of reasons, or three, more than one, more than two. One of them was that his intention was to come to America and call the family only when he was well established, so that the family wouldn't have to go through what many of the immigrants came. They had to start from scratch. He wanted to make sure that when we came here, we were either as well or better than when we were. Now, because of the word better, let me say this, that in Italy, we suffered nothing as far as food was concerned, place was concerned, either before or during the war, because we were self-sufficient with the food that we needed and everything else. And then, of course, if there was any concessions, any help from the area there, my father being in his position there were, it's who you know. And so he was well known. And so if there was any ration or anything like that, why, we got first choice, So we didn't suffer, So we didn't come from, we have to, no. We came because it was after the pressure of the war and the long time being away as a family. We said, well, let's explore the new country, let's do it. If we don't like it, we can always come back. Because we have place to come back to. So that was one. And so my grandfather, was very specific that he didn't want the family to suffer. Then came First World War, and that got the another problem into the time element. Then came the Depression over here in America. And then came Second World War. And so the communication and the type of life or what have you was not that good. It was difficult. But as soon as the war was over, back again there, and the communication started. We got a letter from my grandfather and says, "Please come and join me." And so we dickered back and forth. He says, we're not hurrying here. What are we going to do? Well, let's do it. It's an adventure. But in those days, America, was the name, the place to go. It was. So we decided, yes, we'll come. And in the meantime, my father had to come first, the old story, and then be called, calling us. And so there was a lapse of about 7 or 8 months before we joined my father over here, and my grandfather and what have you. Now, communication, transportation at the time was not by airplane. It was by boats. And it would take about 10, 12 days, no matter which boat you took. Maybe a little longer if it was a smaller boat, depending. And so when we came, we had to come through a boat, on a ship. And it was not a passenger ship. Let me get back to what happened. So in the meantime, while my father was here, we didn't enroll in school because we would have to leave, as soon as the papers and things were done. And so we decided to stay out of the school, enroll into the next level. Remember, we went up to the 9th grade or so. And we took English lessons from a friend of ours. He had a PhD, and he was very, very good. But the English that we took from him was the English that they taught over there, which was not American English, was the English, the Anglo type. And so a little difference in the pronunciation and choice of words and so on. Anyway, so we had about 6 months, before we came here. We had 6 months of schooling, in the English language. Now, when we decided to come, we had to go, of course, through the American consulate and do all the papers and what have you. Well, back again is who you know. My father knew the assistant consul. It was an Italian gentleman, Corrado D'Ambrosio was his name. That was our link with the American documentation and what have you. And so we did our papers, and they said, well, there will be a ship, a passenger ship. I don't remember, it was like in September or something like that, October, something like that. He says, however, be ready, because there may be something that may come up, and so be ready. So we were on the waiting list, half packed and what have you. Well, in August, he called and he said, we have an American officer who was supposed to go back to America, and he is not going, and it's a Liberty ship, which was an American ship, a Liberty ship at the time. They called him, I think it was the Marine Lynx, if was the name, that he has given up his officer's quarters on the ship, and if you can, you can come earlier. You can go. You can come to America earlier. And we said, okay, we'll do it. He says, well, come over and we'll show you, and we do all the documentation. So when we went to the consulate in Mergellina in Naples, it's an area, like you say, River Park, So anyway, so we went there. The American consul was so nice. He showed us on the map, where we would be coming to, and they were very helpful. And on top of that, back again to who you know, we didn't have to go through, and we came as a regular passenger with proper dispensation, not going through Ellis Island, not going through Checkpoint Charlie or anything. We just got off the ship. As a matter of fact, from the ship, we could see my father and relatives there waiting for us. We just got off, and that was it. Just showed our passport, and that was it. So the privileges, it helps. Anyway, so when we got there, we went to New Jersey, Newark, because there was my mother's side of the family. Two of them were doctors. One of them was a surgeon, and another one was an MD, and others were also in government of New Jersey, Newark. And so we spent a week there, and then we trained back to Fresno Clovis, because the station was in Fresno, on a train in a sleeping car. It wasn't a regular seats, but we had a sleeping quarters there. You have your own little bedroom, you know, on the train and what have you. And we came to Clovis, and we lived in the house that my grandfather had bought, and alongside of the house there was like a whole block around. The house was on the block, and he owned the block. So we came to the house. It's still there, still in the family. And he also decided while we were there that he would be building some homes. So he was the first one to build in Clovis about 14 homes. He sold all but 6, and they're still there. They are known in Clovis as the brick homes, tiles, not bricks, but the tiles. The tiles were made by Craycroft Company, which was in the West Fresno here, you know, Craycroft Company. And they're tiles of red tiles, which in itself, you know, acted as a a double pane window or for the heat and cold and what have you, you know, because they had chambers. See, it wasn't solid brick; it wasn't chambers of air. See the tiles, you know. So we built that, and then there was a corner, the corner, which is still there too, that my grandfather didn't want to be bothered with it. He just built the homes and what have you, you know. The 6 homes are still in the family. And I own part of it, the rest went to my sister, and then my sister passed away, went to her children. My father then said, well, the corner, we got to do something with it, you know. So he got in touch with, through his friends in Clovis, you know, who knew who to talk to. He got in touch with Standard Oil, and so he built a Chevron station. In addition to that, of course, my grandfather had a ranch, and the ranch was later developed by Bonadelli. The ranch was where east of San Agnes is right now, which was bound by, was a quarter section, 160 acres, was bound by Millbrook, Herndon, Cedar, and Sierra Avenues. We raised, my grandfather raised grapes, 4 varieties. One of them is the Alicante, Zinfandel, you know, all those. And his business was to grow grapes, buy grapes, and ship it. And so he was also in the shipping as well as raising. He didn't live in on the ranch, and he didn't live in the house that we ended up living in Clovis because he was all by himself. He lived at in the Sequoia Hotel. There were 2 main hotels at that time, the Californian, and they're still there, you know, they're not what they used to be, and the Sequoia. At the Sequoia Hotel, he had an office that he used for the shipping and so on. Later on that land, he built me a home when I got married. I'll get to that later, but it's still there. Okay, I just wanted to mention something about Clovis first, you know. It was such a small town, you know, at the time, you know, and the people were just wonderful. I mean, we had absolutely no problem of any kind. So it was very nice, and it's nice. The community was small enough that you felt at home, and we didn't have to come to the West Fresno where all the Italians were, which we did, for Sundays and things like that, to get together and so on. But anyway, so we came in August. And it was time to go to school. And we had to make a decision. And my sister didn't want to go to public school. She wanted to go to a private school, and the only one that was available was San Joaquin Memorial. So she went to San Joaquin Memorial, and she rode the Moyer stage. It was a bus service that went from Clovis to Fresno. And San Joaquin Memorial at the time was a separate type of a school, and I'm saying separate in the matter of the boys and the girls, So the boys were on one side of the campus, and the girls were on the other side of the campus. And the division in between the two was the pool, swimming pool. But anyway, it was, us and them, but we had classes. The girls had classes on their side. We had classes on our side. Well, anyway, I went to Clovis. And the Clovis school, I couldn't ask for anything better for the kids, as well as the administration. When I got there at Clovis and registered, there was a person, a teacher or an employee of the school that was a counselor and dean of students. And so he heard that I was the foreign student, And so he called me in his office and he says, where are you from? He asked me. I said, I'm from Copernicus, but otherwise, the Salerno city that you would recognize because it's, more on the map. He says, I was in the Air Force, and I flew a lot of missions over Salerno. So, a small world. And so he says, it was very nice of you, because we had the liking for the Americans and so on. So it was very nice. And his name was Tink Kasner. They have the school, the Kasner. Well, that's it. He became then assistant superintendent to Dr. Buchanan. And so, here we go. I come to Clovis and I have someone that flew over my town. The kids, the students were excellent. We had our own little group. Somehow they got me in the little clique, the little group, And one of the most that you would recognize, the two twins, brother and sister, the Hollowell, Chevrolet, the Hollowell kids, James and Jane. James is still living. Jane passed away, and others. And among that group that I was there was my wife too. So we were all part of we had lunch together and, we did things together. But I'll come back to that for my wife's side of it. So my sister, we started school in August. My sister around Christmas time or thereabouts, came from San Joaquin. We received our documents and papers from school because we didn't have the time to get it at the time. So we had to order it, and my cousin over there took care of everything. So he mailed us all the documents from the school that we attended and everything else. And so he says, she said, I brought my papers to San Joaquin Memorial, and the principal, nun, was a nun, looked it over, and said, because of the type of schooling and courses that we had in Italy, says, if you take a science class, which we didn't have in Italy, a science class, U.S. history, an American government class, you can graduate in 2 years rather than 4. Well, I said to my sister, I have the same documents that you have because we did the same thing. So I went to Clovis, and Clovis didn't recognize, they weren't that far along in the modern world, They didn't recognize that, and I said, well, I'm not going to spend 4 years if I can do it in 2. And so I went to San Joaquin Memorial, and I talked to Brother Albert, who was the principal at the time. And I said, Brother Albert, my sister, who talked to I don't remember the name of the nun, and said that she could graduate in 2 years because of, here's my papers, Well, he looks at me and he says, well, you can do the same thing. So I had to take, of course, American government and science. I took chemistry. And I said, that's it. I said, great. So again, at the San Joaquin Memorial, did I get any help and what have you? Yep, it sure did. And I graduated then at the age of 16. My sister decided not to go to college. I decided to go to, at the time, Fresno State. Fresno State, which was located at where City College is right now on McKinley. That was another experience. Fresno State. 16 years old. The youngest one on campus. Well, you got to make friends, what have you. Well, the ones that I felt more comfortable with were the Armenian kids. They invited me to their doings, the Triple X, and what have you. I was just one of them. So I felt, welcome. Then I went to the professors. Another good experience. They were just wonderful. I mean, they were so patient, understanding. My English was limited, Oh, I got to go back for a minute. English. In Clovis, I had to take English, of course. It's part of the class. The teacher in December, remember I came in August, the class had to give a book report. I told her, I said, a book report? My language is not that good. She says, practice makes it perfection. She says, you are going to give a book report. And I'll get you help. She got me the English teacher, librarian, part-time, Roxy Varadian, who left quite a bit from, and she coached me, and I got in front of the class giving a book report. But I did. Anyway, so I won't forget, that same teacher, she was also a French major. And later on, she came to work at Hoover in my department, where I was department chair, as as a French teacher. But let's go back. So I went to Fresno State. The teachers were fantastic, great. I mean, all helpful and what have you. You could talk to them, and you would meet them at the student union, the cafeteria, or what have you, and they wouldn't mind sitting down, talking, and have a cup of coffee or something like that. Wonderful. And I stayed with the foreign language because foreign language just intrigued me. Even with the soldiers, I would listen, the English, language and what have you. So I was then going through my years, and my major was political science. And so I was well advanced in the political science major, minor, whatever, major actually. Then one day, the department chair of the foreign languages called me and said, "I'd like for you to meet with me with your advisor." I said, "Okay." So I met with the advisor, the three of us. And the advisor said, they give aptitude tests, what have you. So the advisor says, I've talked to the department chair of the foreign language, and your knowledge and what have you, you would fit better in the foreign language department in education. I said, well, I like languages. Why not? I mean, I didn't have any special preference. I mean, I'll do it, And so I said, but in order for me to get a degree with the foreign language, it wouldn't be just one language, it would be what the Romance languages, all the derivatives of the Latin, and general secondary, which would give me the ability to teach any and all. I said, I would have to take some additional classes in the languages that I had skipped. I skipped the lower divisions. Because what am I going to take, like French one or Spanish one, after I've studied French and Latin and what have you, and Italian on top of it, Says, no, this is the department chair, very accommodating. He says, no, you don't have to do that. He says, I will give you those lower division courses on independent study. Says, I'll give you the things that I need for you to know. We'll go to my office, or we go to the student union, we have a cup of coffee, and I will ask you questions and, go over and see if you're cognizant of, what you should know. I said, okay, if you can do that, that's fine, which means I won't interrupt my graduation date and what have you. So we did, and it was just wonderful. We called him, his name was Dr. Carlos Rojas, and we used to call him Tio Carlos. Tio as a title of, respect. A bunch of us were foreigners anyway, Tio Carlos. Another one was El Gorriaga, who was at Fresno State. He was a classmate of mine. His wife, Carmen Venegas, now El Gorriaga, of course, El Gorriaga passed away. He was a coach, the head coach over there. He was a Basque, fantastic. Later on, when Carlos retired, El Gorriaga took over the department for a while. Tio Carlos was the uncle of Phil Patiño. Phil Patiño, who was a Spanish teacher with me in my department at Hoover. And Patino, they have the school named after him, Philip Patino School, which is by the park, that they want to rename now. Anyway, so he was just a wonderful person. We, just like having another father. And lucky enough, also, I had to do student teaching. And so where did he send me? Well, Fresno High, which in those days was the school in town. Fresno High for quality of you name it. And he put me with the best teacher that I think felt, with who was also a Basque, as a master teacher. And his name was Eliseche. And his daughter now works at Fresno State. Anyway, he took me in as his son. He had 4 daughters, but no boys. So I was sort of his adopted, And I graduated. I graduated and did my degree, teaching credential, and my degree in the foreign language and what have you. And then there was the question of, I graduated. I was 20 years old when I graduated. So it was the question of what do I do now, as a job? Well, Fresno High wanted me to stay there, but they didn't have the room because the teachers were there, but there was going to be a room the next year when the McLean opened up. So one of the teachers, Hope Ostendorf, was there, would be going to McLean. So Fresno High then would have an opening. And I said, well, what do I do in the meantime? I'd like to stay here, What do I do in the meantime? He says, we'll find you a job. This is the kind of treatment, that I got. We'll find you a job between Fresno High and the administration downtown Irwin then and so on and so forth, So we'll find you a job. So they found me a job at Kerman. And so for the 1 year, I had to travel from Clovis to Kerman to teach, Halfway through the year, I was called at Fresno High. You're coming back to us. Here's what you're going to be teaching. So they had me all set up. And that was another, good treatment in my book. So while I was at Fresno High, before I mentioned that my master teacher, Eliseche, he gave me a chance of teaching, of doing even more than what I was supposed to do. When he got hurt, because he was working in the shop on his car, the carburetor blew off and burned him, so he had to have a substitute or somebody taking care of his classes. He says, no, I don't want anybody, I want Tony to do it. But Tony is busy, going to school and this and that. He says, I'll talk to the administration. So between the administration again of Fresno High and the city schools, they worked out a situation with the university that I would go. They would have a substitute to babysit. I would do the planning, the explaining, the lessons and so on, then come back, So anyway, that's how I got to know some of the advanced students because of that situation. So the treatment was just excellent. Then I moved to Hoover High School. At Hoover High School, I was a department chair, one hat. The other hat was filling in a period of dean of students, the disciplinarians, imagine me, disciplinarian, not much older than the kids. But anyway, so I was that. And then in charge of the athletic gates, so for the student body. And at Hoover, I also kept in touch with Fresno State constantly because of the teaching, the student teachers. The student teachers had to come through me, the department chair, and I would assign them to the right teacher, and I would monitor that. And so I kept in touch with Tio Carlos, and company, and they would send their advisors, to check on the student teachers. And I told them, I said, if you're going to send student teachers here, I don't want you to be the one that gives the grade to the student teacher. We are going to give the grade to the student teachers, or else you send them someplace else. Because when you come 2 or 3 times a semester, what do you know of what that student teacher is or is not doing? Now, I had the time as a department chair also to observe, the student teachers of other teachers. I would drop in, listen to it, and see just how things proceeded. So I would have a good idea of what kind of grade, or changes, if needed to be made, with the department. And that was with the German. It didn't make any difference, So that was the Hoover situation. Now, in the meantime, Tio Carlos, came one day to me in 1964, came to me. That was when Hoover opened up, shortly after Hoover opened up. He says, I'm thinking of expanding the foreign language department. At that time it was just the basics, which would be some Latin, not much, French, Spanish, and German. He says, I'm going to create some new languages. I says, what are they? He says, one of them is Armenian. I said, oh, good. And the other is Italian. I said, excellent. So I said, do you have the people? He says, yes, I do. He says, for the Armenian, I think it was Barlow. I don't know if he was the one that started it. It was somebody else, I think it was. And then Barlow came a little later on. But anyway, he says, yes, I do have the Armenian. And says it's all pretty well set. And I said, now you have to look for the Italian. He says, no, I don't have to look. He says, I already know who. I said, who? He says, you. I said, me? He says, yes. You. I would like for you to start the Italian language at Fresno State. And so there I was. Again, the administration very helpful. Downtown administration at Hoover to work out a schedule that I would be still retaining. Remember, still retaining all my duties that I had over there besides teaching and department chair. Still retaining the same duties. And I would be part-time then teaching at Fresno State. So I was the first one that started the Italian language. And it was great. Again, I had kids. It just was wonderful. Just to give you an example of the kind of kids that they were, we treated them, my wife and I, we treated them to come to our house, the whole class, for a dinner, at times. And we were talking in class, sometimes you get off the subject a little bit, and and we were talking about wine and making wine, and you had to have the crusher and things like that, and so on and so forth, And one day, I came home, and my wife says, something has been delivered to us. It was a crusher. And I said, where'd that come from? I said, well, I don't know. They delivered it, So when I went to class, I said, somebody, who's the guilty person? So this girl, she was from up north around the Napa area. She says, I was talking to my father. My father didn't need it anymore, use it anymore. I thought I'd have him send it to you. That was it. I mean, that's kind of people, Anyway, so I taught Italian, and I was there for 7 years. Now, in the meantime, the program grew, and I wasn't able to handle the whole thing because I had my duty. I had to either quit or one or the other. So I'll hang on for a couple of years and see how it goes, and I'll get somebody to take care of the overflow or the addition, I should say. And so I drafted Sergio Negro, the chaplain at the Newman Center, who was from Pinerolo, Italy. He was born there. And he ended up having a PhD in theology. He's passed away now. But I said, Sergio, I need help, in teaching a class of Italian. And he said, but I'll give you the material. I'll give you the material, and I'll tell you what to do. You teach the class. And so we kept it going, and it was great. But then there came the problem of you got to make a decision. And the decision was basically I was happy with the city schools in the position that I was, and with chance to improve. It meant for me that I had a family. I'll get back to the family later. I had a family, I had kids, and it meant that I had to leave town because Fresno State at the time didn't even give a master's degree. It was just a teacher's college, basically, If you wanted anything higher, you had to go someplace else. So I had to leave. And not to brag, I didn't need the financial situation because I owned my own home my grandfather gave me. I owned land, I had other income and what have you. And I had to leave the family. It just, it just wasn't the right thing to do. So I said, no, I will have to back off and resign. And looking back to the way the Armenian progressed, I feel sort of a little guilty that the Italian did not. Because they hired people that they were there for the job. When the bell rang, or before the bell rang, they would go home. I mean, they weren't interested, and they didn't have the personality, some of them, to improve or build up, It takes more than just knowledge of the subject. It takes personality to deal, especially with kids. So I feel sort of guilty that perhaps, most likely, if I'd have stayed there, we would be either up or even better. I had that interest in the language, in the culture, because I felt that Italy had a lot to offer. So that was it. Well, now, we are trying to build up and revive what should have been gone on. And and I'm glad to be working with, and again, who you deal with. I'm glad that I'm working with some nice people, and we have established so far the language as a minor, and there's a minor, and the ability for the students to study abroad for whatever time, and scholarships. Why did I stay with it when I was called, to be part of the revival of the language? Again, because of the people. And the people, when I walked in, and the way they conducted themselves, and the interest that they showed, and so on and so forth, I said, okay, I'll stick with it. Otherwise, I'd have walked away, because again, how you deal with. So it's progressing, and I'm glad that I'm part of it, and I am with the Kremen, still with the Kremen School of Education, and I'm and the alumni in doing scholarships and what have you for the kids, for the students. Well, now I think that pretty well does the schooling. Now let's go to my private life. Well, back in Clovis, we had the group, and there was a young lady there that I met along with others. And I saw her because I went to San Joaquin Memorial. I saw her sporadically once in a while. And the place that I would see her would be a church. But when I really got to know her, she was 2 years behind me, and I should have been with her. She was 2 years behind me, so when she came, she went to Fresno State, and she was taking classes, of course, which I had taken to begin with, because of the credentials and what have you. So we were in line often enough, and I talked to her. I said, you have to take these courses right here. And so I said, I have these books that you're taking these courses. I said, you can use mine. You don't have to buy them. And so we exchanged. I give her one. Then we ended up taking some courses also together because of the teaching part of it, because she was also a teacher. And I said, you can do that. I said, okay, that's fine. Then I ended up driving, and she ended up driving to Fresno State. So often and off times, we would exchange. I'd pick her up, or she'd pick me up, and we'd go. And so we got together. Fresno State also in those days had dances at the student union, and it would be for the freshman class, and to get acquainted kind of deal. And so again, we used to go, and so one thing led to another. We ended up going. We go steady, and so we married. And we married in 1965 after she graduated, because I had already graduated. I was already in school. She graduated in 65, and we started the family. And she wanted to get married, so her name, still somewhat known in the Clovis area, her name was Louise Sorrenti. The father was a rancher. He farmed on right by Fresno State now, the land that the Fresno State farms on Sierra and Chestnut. And there's the Sierra Nut House. The Sierra Nut House is one of her sisters, Joanne, and she also has the other business at the Villaggio on Nice and Blackstone. The other sister, Diane, she has she just sold recently, but she had all this time, the Biscotti House, which is on Clovis Avenue and Sierra. Well, anyway, and the brother, Frank, he lives on Leonard and Shields. He farms, and he also does almond hauling, for himself and whoever wants to do their hauling there. So that's the family. Sicilian, we call them Sicilian, There's a difference, there's Sicilian, and then there's Italian, the mainland, But anyway, I could have not done any better in marrying her. I mean, it's unbelievable. Well, she was a teacher, and she taught for 2 years. No, 1 year. 1 year. At the end of 1 year, we had a child, my first son, Rocco. And she says, I like to raise a family. And she says, and I like to be involved in community help. And she started with her mother at Clovis High School, where they had the PTA, the parent teachers, and they used to put dinners and this and then, so on, for the school kids and so on. So she started there. Well, she soon graduated, and she was involved in guilds. And she became, she was in the guild, the Los Rancheros, one of the guilds. There's more than one, and they're all for the benefit of Valley children. She became the guild chair of all the guilds, and she was also on the board as a representative of all the guilds at the Valley Children Hospital. And incidentally, the guilds used to put on, dinners and what have you. They were in the process one year, of preparing the barbecue, pit barbecue. Dig a pit and you barbecue in the pit. Well, my relative, Joanne's husband, was the one that was cooking. Well, he made a mistake of throwing some gasoline into the pit to help. It backed up. My son was there, and he got burned. He came home, he looked like, I didn't recognize him. Valley children. They took care of him. They got, it was a service doctor, a specialist in burn. Took care of him. You couldn't even tell today what they did with him. Just wonderful. Well, anyway, so she was involved in that. So she came to me after a year. She says, I want to get involved in this. Do I have to go teaching? I said to her, it's up to you. And for all the years that I was married to her, about 48 years, until in an accident, she died. For all the years, I never signed a check. It was her job. So I asked her, I says, you're in charge of the money. I says, why do you ask me? I says, can we afford it? She says, yeah, we don't have any payments. No car payments, no this, no that. Says, you're doing fine. And then I had income off the land too, and so on and so forth. I said, well, if you can do it, if you can do it, you do it. Fine, no problem. So that was the end of her teaching. And from then on, she was all involved in community situations. Then tragedy came along, and so I have been struggling. But I kept busy. Like the old philosopher said, in mens sana, in corpore sano. A sound mind, a sound body. So the mind controls the body, so therefore keep your mind going. And I was lucky enough to get involved with Fresno State back again. And I spent half of my time there, and it's kept me going. Another good thing, and again, all credit to her, because she was the one that was at home, and I was gone most of the times because not only of my teaching, but also my extracurricular activities, and everything else. She was the one that ran the house. I've been blessed with 3 great children. My 3. Rocco, Vinci, which is still involved with Fresno State, and Christy. All doing very well as far as their family. No problem with the kids. I never had any problems with them. I'll tell you the reason why we never had any problems. Well, one of the reasons. They would ask us something, or the kids, they would ask something or ask her. And they would hear the same story no matter whether they hear it from here or from her. But another step. Sometimes they would go to the grandparents, So they would go to her parents. And they would hear the story, whatever the answer was. They would go to my parents and they hear the same story. So no matter where they went, it was all the same music. And so, it gives credibility, and it also gives, good standing, good character. So I've had no problems. I have 10 grandchildren, okay? And I have 9 great-grandchildren. My grandchildren, one of them is in San Diego, and he's a fire inspector. He went to Fresno State under the Smith Camp program. Then he went to Cal Poly because Cal Poly had better fire engineering department. Those are Vinci's kids. Vinci, my middle daughter. She's the the main person there at Fresno State too. She's working. She's chair of the board of governors or whatever, in Fresno State. And she one daughter, she works. She went to Loyola Marymount, the youngest one, and she works for Google and so on. And they got it made. I mean, what a job! They even feed them over there on the places and things like that, so that the people don't have to leave, and everything is there. Another one, I used to kid her, the second child, Christina, of Vinci. I used to kid her And I says, hey, Hollywood, the way she go around, and guess where she ended up? She married an art person, that sells, art. He has a studio in New York and a studio in Beverly Hills. That's where she lives, in Beverly Hills. I used to kid her, And she has two kids, 2 boys and 1 girl. And then Andriana is not married. And my son Rocco, he has 4 kids, and he lives in Oak Park, and he has 4 girls. Yeah, 4 girls, and 2 of them are graduates already. One of them from Northwestern, another from Illinois University, and 2 of them. The last 2 are in Wisconsin. Then my other daughter, Christy, she has 3 kids. One of them is in Washington with her husband, who is manager of one of the Target stores over there, and the other one lives in Carmel. Downtown Carmel, and her husband is a highway patrol, and the other son is in San Diego, and then my Vinci, the son, she has Andriana with a Google, and Christina at Beverly Hills. The son, the first, Vincent. He is with PR Farms, and he is best known for Enzo olive oil. That's my grandson. Yeah. So, and he has 2 girls, twins, girls, and one boy, and his name is Rocco, which is, since my son didn't have, so he got his name Rocco. Of course, doesn't have the same last name, but they put it in the middle name. So he is Rocco Petrosino Bricuti. Yeah, so that's my, so I got 9 great grandkids. I mean, yeah, and 10 grandkids. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I can't say anything other than the regret that I lost my wife. She would have enjoyed this. And that's it, really, that's the story. And I've been blessed with good health too. I'm 87, soon to be 88. And that's it. Fresno State has developed, to a very comprehensive type of a school, and I feel that it is important for me, to continue helping, the programs. That every individual is different, so you listen and you help.